So I've just finished the repair of this Minolta 35 Model F, and I didn't find much help on the internet in terms of how to refurbish this camera, so I thought maybe I could help a few people if I showed them what I'd done. So here we go. It's actually, I bought it off Craigslist for like 80 bucks. It's in beautiful condition. I don't know whether that was a good buy or not, but it wasn't working. I knew that when I bought it, and it probably had more issues than I fully appreciated, but the good news is it's just in fantastic condition. It's 1952 Minolta 35 Model F. It's got a Super Rocker 45mm f2.8 lens on it. The interesting thing about this particular Minolta is that it's one of the early Leica copies, and in fact it shares the thread mount with the Leica cameras. It's something of a copy actually of the Leica 3, although not a very precise copy. The layout is very similar, but it's maybe half an inch taller. Very similar format. A lot of the knobs and other features are similar. The top plate looks extremely similar to a Leica, and obviously that was the look and the operation that they were going for here. There were actually direct copies of Leica. I wouldn't say this is one of those, but it is a nice example, and they're not that common, and they're a beautiful camera. But this camera suffered from a fairly common fault on these old Minoltas, more than the Leicas actually, and that is that the shutter curtain was completely worn out in a couple of ways. First of all, when I opened the back, the shutter curtain material, the rubberized material, just fell out in flakes, and in fact this is a remnant of that. You might be able to see this is the rubberized material, and it is hardened over the 60, nearly 70 years since it was made, not too surprisingly, and it's flaked off, and actually the shutter curtain is just about transparent at this point, which obviously doesn't work. So the shutter wasn't working. In fact, I've got this photograph here that shows the back shutter curtain as I got to it. So the shutter curtain was in a pretty bad state, and that needed replacing. The ribbons were still intact but quite badly stretched, so the lath was not orthogonal, and actually was getting trapped under the cover as it went over the roller in a skewed manner. So I needed to make some new shutter curtains, which was a bit daunting, but I did purchase some shutter curtain material, which comes like this. Actually, you can see where I've taken a strip off this here, and that's formed the shutter curtains. And then in this same package is my shutter curtain ribbon. I think I bought about 2 meters. So for about $35 I got enough to do numerous cameras of this 35mm format. Not sure whether I've got enough time in my life to do it, because it took pretty much all my spare time over the last 3 or 4 weeks. But I've got there, and we've got it all set up. So I'll show some pictures of the manufacturer of the shutter curtain, I actually reused the existing laths, which took a bit of cleaning up with a razor blade, well, a scalpel, and then I bonded the laths, the shutter curtain onto the laths, and then likewise the ribbon onto the laths. And you can see I made the shutter curtain basically as one piece, and then cut down somewhere near the middle to create two shutter curtains, the front and the back shutter curtains. All the bonding of these shutter curtains and the ribbons, and the bonding of the ribbons and curtains onto the camera rollers was done with this Super X adhesive from Japan, which is a one-part adhesive. It sets pretty quickly and it's strong, but remains somewhat flexible, which is what you need for this kind of job when you're dealing with flexible cloth. The shutter curtains are actually silk based with a rubberized surface. That's how they're manufactured. So I'm not going to dismantle the camera again to show this, but the application of the shutters into the camera was pretty much a trial and error process. I did use some double-sided tape to temporarily position the ribbons and shutter curtain onto the rollers, but then ultimately bonded them on with the Super X adhesive. And I got it wrong a couple of times, repositioned, and then finally got the laths lined up so that when I opened the curtain, the laths sat on top of each other at the right hand side of the opening. So once I got that sorted out, everything else went fairly quickly. The high-speed shutter control was working fine. I did adjust the tension of the shutter curtains just to get that right and make sure the curtains were operating together and were parallel as they went across the frame. That's pretty trivial, actually. We have two screws here on the base of the camera. This cover comes off, and then there's a couple of adjusting knobs, adjusting screws that adjust the tension of two rollers on this side of the camera. I did all the shutter curtain assembly in camera, so really the only tools you need to do this job are a screwdriver to take off these 8 screws here. That you get access to the curtain that way, and I left everything in place other than this bottom plate, which I removed so that I could adjust, first take off the tension on the rollers and then reapply the tension, and I just applied as much as I thought was about right to achieve the speed, and then by trial and error adjusted them to suit. So everything else except one thing worked on this camera. The viewfinder, the rangefinder is all in good condition. The wind mechanism all works as advertised, but the slow speed shutter adjustment wasn't working at all. That was frozen. But even that's a relatively simple task to deal with. Actually, I will take off this bottom. I mentioned that it's the way that you get at the shutter curtain rollers, but it's also the way that you on under here. There's 3 screws that you can remove, and those screws are actually shown you might be able to see them if I shine a light in here. There's 2 screws that you can see in the bottom behind the lens there, and 1 there. Those are undone on the bottom of the camera. Once you've undone those, this cover here falls out, and that exposes the slow speed mechanism. Now I think you can remove the slow speed mechanism. I didn't. I just washed it with lighter fuel, let it dry, and then re-lubricated with very light oil, and it started working. So now my slow speed works fine. The operation, as anyone that owns one of these has probably worked out, is kind of unusual in that for higher speeds one adjusts the speed once you've wound it using this knob. It's set to 500 right now, so I can fire that off, and you'll see how it operates. And then you can wind and adjust to different speeds. That's 500, you've got 200, 150, 35, that will be 35. In each case the front shutter opens, of course, and then the rear shutter curtain closes. There's a bulb and also a 25:1 setting here. When you set it there, then the adjustment of the shutter speed goes on to the front knob. This is the knob that wasn't having any effect when I got the camera, but this knob can be moved from a 25th to 8, 4, half of a second and 1 second, so you'll see a little bit clearer how this operation works when I put it onto 1 second. So the front shutter curtain goes from right to left, a second goes by, or something like a second, and then the rear curtain goes by. So what we're doing when we wind these curtains back, you've got these 2 laths. One of them that you can see is the back curtain. There's one directly in front of it that is the front curtain, and as we wind it back, they're actually directly in line when they're here in this position behind this cover, and then when you open them up, the front curtain, which is what you can see now, opens, and then the rear curtain closes off the light. There is a timer setting on this as well as bulb, which is I guess could be useful. What that does is it opens the front and then stops, and actually it will stay open until you adjust the front knob, and then it closes. So I'll just set it to 25th of a second, and you'll see how that looks all a bit faster. There you are. This is a coupled rangefinder camera. I did have the top off just to clean it out and check it out. It's not too difficult. There's a short-sightedness adjuster on the eyepiece. The rangefinder works great on this and looks to be in good calibration. That works on these 2 views. We're not obviously not looking through the lens on a rangefinder. The knob, unlike the Leica, the shutter release is raised off the plate of the top plate, which is really nice ergonomically, and it has a counter that ticks down as you wind on as well. So the way this coupled rangefinder works is as you adjust the focus, that changes. It's on a helicoil, so it's coming in and out. It changes the focus, of course, but as well as changing the focus of the lens, it actually is coupled, which is pretty advanced for a camera, I guess, of 1952. It pushes on this little spigot here, and that changes the rangefinder mirror angle, I suppose. I didn't check out the whole mechanism, but that's what allows the rangefinder central dot to move in relation to the general picture. This camera does have a self-timer, which is a nice addition, and it operates on a clockwork mechanism, which I was kind of surprised to find worked on this model, and just forgot how it worked for a moment there, but the way it works is once you've set the exposure, you set the rangefinder, then you use this little switch to set the self-timer going. And there you are, the shutter is released. So there you have it. I'm pretty pleased with how the repair went, and I'm not sure how much the camera is worth now, but I'm not for selling it. I'll put some film in it and enjoy taking some pictures.